So welcome everyone who is joining us today. I am super excited to have Deb here again. She is somebody that I personally feel better anytime around her. And it just is a space of expansion and excitement and fun. And so I couldn't resist asking her to come back. After she said to me at one point, there's a bridge between science and spirituality. And I was like, ooh, I know this is true, but let's talk some more about what the heck that is. And so we're going to use that as a foundation today, and who knows where we're going to go. But before I dive in and ask some questions, I need you guys to know that Deb Frueh is the owner of Internal Wilderness and also does this amazing once a year event in this portal of heaven, I think, in Franklin Grove, which is called the WorldWide Metaphysical Tribe event. And so if you don't know about it, get on to Facebook, check out WorldWide Metaphysical Tribe, and all the details will be there for next year. You need to be planning already so that you can attend this very exclusive VIP event where you're going to find more of your people, more people that will reflect who you are, and you'll be able to have deeper conversations and help the world to expand into the consciousness that it wants to be in. So anyway, that's Deb. So hi, Deb.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure. So when we were walking through the Journeys Path, a local metaphysical shop, you mentioned that there's a bridge between spirituality and science. And at the time you were talking about quartz crystals and watches. And so can you kind of go there, and then let's see where else there's bridges that I'm not even aware of.
Absolutely. Well, I could roll this story back quite a bit. A long time ago, like 1993, I was reading a magazine that doesn't exist anymore called Conscious something or other. And every single interview in it was so top-notch. Mm-hmm. And it really, really inspired me because I'm sort of like divided down the middle, half left brain, half right brain. Yeah. And it got me on both sides of my brain because it was very spiritually oriented conversation, but it kept bouncing off the edges of science. And I was really excited by it because that's how I like it. Okay. I called up a friend and told her, man, you should read this magazine. She said, oh, I know a TV producer. Would you like to talk to him? Here I am. Okay. 1993. I have 4 toddlers. I'm a single mom. And I'm like, yeah, sure.
I love it.
Hop in my car and have breakfast with him. I learned that if you want to do a TV program, even back then, and more so now, you have to basically pay for it yourself. And then perhaps someone will pick it up. And if they do, you won't make any money anyway. So that's the story in a nutshell. And I said, I just really feel like I need to do a talk show. I feel like I want to probe people about the nexus between science and spirituality. And he just put his fork down and he turned and he looked at me and he said, do you know that I go to a center called the Science of Spirituality? And I said, no. And then it was like all the pieces fell into place for him. Mm-hmm. And he's like, okay, here's the thing, I'm getting you involved in a project. And we did a huge project together that never saw the light of day, never got paid for, but this is all learning, I didn't know what I was doing. I really didn't. But it made me realize that there is, this is a thing, that this is something that people really do resonate with. And it's happening even though they aren't realizing it. And so let's go to the quartz. You know, I had a quartz crystal that I bought at the store. It's in West Chicago, Illinois, the Journey's Path. And it's a quartz crystal, double terminated, completely clear. It just looks like water with a shape. It's just jaw-droppingly gorgeous. And I decided to look it up and see, what could I learn about crystals? And it turns out that crystals move across the spectrum of matter. They aren't just this piece of thing with weight. They actually vibrate at a level that makes them not always a solid.
Mhm.
And this blew my mind. But I kept reading, and it turns out they put jewels in watches because that's what these things do. That's
Mhm.
what they do the best. They vibrate at a certain rate, and that vibration creates X effect. And quartz is particularly good for keeping time. And I was shocked. I had no clue. I mean, this was years and years and years and years ago. And so I thought, well, I have a very sciencey mind, and I like to get proof if you can get it. Some things you can't get proof for. I developed a point of view on that is, that you can walk down the road of your life holding logic's hand for quite a while, but eventually you have to set them down on the side of the road and tell them you'll be back, go
Mhm.
do the other things, and then come back and pick up logic again and continue with your life. But there are places logic doesn't go, and science is logic. Um, the higher sciences, the more esoteric versions of the higher sciences, maybe not so much, because that's really where when it finally trickles down to people like us, that's where quantum entanglement comes in, which basically says, if I throw a rock in a pond, it could start it could affect a star at the edge of the universe.
Mhm.
Or chaos theory, which says, the butterfly flaps its wings and it starts the typhoon in China. So those concepts came from higher science, which doesn't stay so strictly with logic. If you have the guts to go there, because most of the scientists who go there are laughed at and shunned, and nobody wants to talk to them. And it doesn't matter how many PhDs you have, you're suddenly nothing.
Mhm.
And so I was interested in this for the reason that there was so much value there, and yet we as a people didn't value the
Mhm.
things that they were exploring.
Mhm.
Um, Another example would be somebody like John Mack. John Mack was a PhD psychiatrist, and somebody came to him and said something about how they thought they had been abducted by an alien, and he's like, "Oh God, no." I had to get the crazy one. And he treated this person and realized that other people were coming to him because word was getting out that he was open-minded.
Mhm. Mhm.
And eventually I think he was at Harvard. They kicked him off the faculty at Harvard. I mean, they really, really treated him badly. And he was just exploring the edges of consciousness. That's what psychiatrists are supposed to do.
Right.
So, you know, it's an undervalued, hugely undervalued um, area that we could all at least logically say that eventually it comes down to us where we can understand it and we can change ourselves because we know these things now.
Mhm.
If we started out as cave people, who knows how we started, but if we did, you build on your knowledge. You learn how to catch something and then you learn about fire and then wow, you cook your beet and the next thing you know, you're making a cassoulet in France. You know,
Right.
so
No, I think it's incredible because it is what you said, and it makes me think of Dr. Hawkins' scale of consciousness, right? And so at this, there's a certain point which Albert Einstein went to, which is reason. So you're saying logic, and in order to move to the next step, you have to abandon reason for a moment and grasp acceptance and allowance and go into that next space. And yet, like, what also comes to me is that as you release it, you end up finding it again. On the other side is another bridge that brings you right back to science and logic, because it is what you're saying. Like, we go to the edge and then we come back and so science comes and supports, right? And then we go to another edge and science
right.
comes back and supports.
Eventually, yes. Unfortunately for the people on the front lines of discovery, it's not quite that way. And,
Mhm.
I mean, great artists died penniless and,
Mhm.
their works weren't recognized for forever and ever. And they're not scientists, but they're not logically based. Uh, and they're not exactly in spirituality, but yes, they are in a way, the way we understand it now, that they were accessing their muse,
Mhm.
accessing their um, intuition, and just riding in that groove, to get that painting out.
Yes,
So, well, you would understand that even more than some because that's what you do too.
absolutely. But to me, I love, because I do stay a little bit more strongly on my right brain. And so I have an appreciation for those who can logically interpret or like bring words to the things that to me are just energy or my groove or whatever that I'm following along with. Like, I feel like the two sides give substance to each other the more that we embrace them. So
Hmm.
it's part of why I wanted to have this conversation. When you were, it was Dr. Mack that you were talking about.
Hmm.
It makes me think of Dr. Weiss too. He was a psychiatrist that went into pulling up past lives, and he accidented into it, right? Like, most of the time that when we don't even know we're walking the edge and somebody pulls us in and we fall over the edge, and it's his willingness to not go with judgment, like, this is
Right.
wrong, I'm done, like, me, let me step out. I love that these two men chose to stay in and go, what else is here that I never anticipated before.
Absolutely. There's another person that I'd just like to touch on right here, and that's Dolores Cannon.
Mhm.
Dolores Cannon is world famous. She's passed now, but she is world famous for her hypnotherapy work. But she doesn't take you to your past lives, although that's what she had finally stepped into. She started out as a pretty decent hypnotherapist who used to just do it at parties.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, so it was like you bring your psychic to the party and they do readings in the other room, or you bring the hypnotherapist and then the next thing you know, everyone's quacking like a duck. I mean, she really was just a party hypnotist. And she started doing, I'm not exactly sure how the past life regression came, but it's something that is often just tripped and fallen into, all of a sudden they start talking about, the Middle Ages and you're like, "What?" You know?
Mhm. Mhm.
But even further than that, with Dolores was beings were coming through her hypnosis subject and telling her things that she needed to know. And she wrote many books about this and she developed something called QHHT, which is quantum hypnosis healing technique, I think.
Oh,
And you can get certified in it, you know, and learn how to do this. But she had to get out of her own way big time for that to actually come to fruition.
right. I think that's so often the case, like getting out of your own way, or maybe even a different way of saying it is like getting out of the way that has been in
Hmm.
order to see the path that's being presented, right? It's like
Right.
it
Right.
often seems scary. I mean, it's easier to go on a path we've already been on, or we've seen everybody else, and it like they're all like, "It's okay. This one's okay," you know. And yet, I don't know. Like sometimes that path that's been well trodden is no longer serving. And
Right.
yeah,
I remember standing at the entry of a new phase of my life, and the way it played out in my mind was I was standing on halfway up a mountain, and all of a sudden the fog poured in,
mm,
and I still had to climb the mountain, and it was just one foot in front of the other.
mhm,
Don't try to get your head around this, you know, just take your one step at a time and don't worry about the outcome, you know, just let it go.
mhm. Yeah, I'm like, I feel that way about life, but I'm actually right there with you in the mountain, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you really do have to rein yourself in because like panic had set up, and you're like, as long as each step in front of you is shown, you're okay. You're really
Right.
okay. Just
Right.
take that step in the next one. And what a great training for really how life is when you're living from the space of expansion.
Well, and eventually you break through the fog and you can see the whole picture.
Hmm.
But it's that part that our monkey mind doesn't want to let go of that,
Hmm.
you know, that makes it really difficult. And we, you know, it's just like every year when I do my event, I have this moment where I say, I'm never doing this again. I am never doing this again. The problems are just not worth the stress. I'm just never doing it again.
Hmm.
And I was in the middle of that, just feeling it so well. And a woman named Laura Wakeland wrote a song about the tribe, and it was so beautiful. I thought, well, I guess I have to do it next year now because I can't waste this nice song.
Okay. And all the rest of us are like, hoorah! Thank you, Laura. Thanks for pulling her all the way through. Like, please let us join you again.
Well, you know, it's funny because out of, you know, all the worry and stress, and then it turned out to be 10 times better than I thought it was going to be, and it's still exploding. So all I can say is, you know, I'm glad I stuck it out.
Yeah,
One foot in
absolutely.
front of the other.
And I'm sure it's exploding in ways that you never anticipated.
Never,
Right.
never.
Yeah. And so going back to like science and spirituality and bridging that gap and then moving your way through, you brought up the quartz, and what it made me think of too is Dr. Emoto. I don't know if you've seen
Mhm.
his work
Sure.
with water.
Right.
And for me, I even though I'm very right brained, I love to see results, right? Like I love to
Right.
see the result of choices. And so I went into this experiment with water and rice, and I
Mhm.
thought, there's just no way. There's no way. And so I wanted to take it to like a different level. And
Mhm.
so with my kids, we were going through a difficult time after my divorce. And so my youngest son was dealing with anger, and I think I was quietly dealing with anger, resentment, and stuff. So I was like, I believe that it's not just words that have power, but like the energy that we're giving off does. And so I was like, I just wanted to see if the water was going to show anything. I didn't believe it was going to, but we were going to do it together. So we set up these two jars, and I can't remember. I think one was love, one was hate, but essentially they were in two places, and we were like, no words. You're just going to like ooze it out. Like whatever it is, you're sending it to the jar. The jar that had the hate word on it, that we sent all of our like anger and upset and like just any judgments, It was a glass, really nice jar. I went to open it and I had to seal it back up at the end because the stench that came out of it was atrocious. There
Oh
was
my
like
God.
mucus growing in this thing.
Ah,
And then the other one was like clear. There was a little bit of like bubble, you know, like rice and water, like can create like little bubbles. It
sure.
had that in it, but you opened it up and it was sweet.
Whoa.
So I don't know that my boys remember it so well, but I will never forget that experiment because I was like, what we do need to release things, first of all. Like, it's not a bad thing to experience emotions and to release them, but to release them to the earth. I mean, the earth can handle it all.
Yeah.
If it can take manure and create crops,
I think
fertilize,
we
right?
I think we all need to set those jars up in our homes.
No doubt.
I
No, but
feel really angry and I'm never going to do this again, and run to my jar that says hate and give it everything, or the opposite, you know.
right.
I think
Yeah.
that's super,
So
because
to
we
me,
we
that was
don't have a place for it.
no. And like, but getting it out of our bodies is
Yeah,
key. Because I was like, if I've got that stuff going on inside me, because I'm like, oh, you know, as an adult, we're taught to like just like keep
right.
it in and put a smiley face on. I'm not so good at that anyway, but like it gave me like a place to release it that didn't talk back, right? Didn't have projections, and just I landed it there and it was out of me, right? And then it also taught us to go to the other one and to share like our good feelings, which,
Yeah.
you know, like sometimes we're not tapped enough to go, oh my gosh, I feel great today. Ooh, I'm going to go share it with the jar, you know? So I do think we may not be able to understand always the bridge between, but we often see the results of things, right? Like,
Mhm.
so whether it's a crystal or our actions, there's results that are created that not everyone can explain quite yet,
Right.
right?
Right. And that's the beauty of it, is that we don't have to know.
Mhm,
Okay. I mean, there with crystals, there's a more concrete example. So for example, lepidolite is where they get lithium,
mhm,
which is a drug to calm you down if you're, have um, mental health issues.
mhm,
When you wear this stone, it goes straight to your heart and calms you down.
mm,
And, I, and they make lithium out of it.
mhm,
Okay, this is all making sense.
mhm. Yeah, and it goes back to the fact that a lot of times we ask for support and yet we're not aware that there's so much support out there from the earth that is just there, you know. So whether you're talking about crystals or essential oils that are just based on plants, you know, giving their medicine in order to help us to feel better, like there's all kinds of earthly support that's available even beyond humans, other humans giving us things
For
in order
sure.
to move us to the states of being that we want to. We just have to ask the question, like, how do I want to feel? So, like, do I actually want to be calmer? Now, if I took that, I might be asleep because I feel like I'm calm already. So I'm like, most of the time, I don't need to be calmer. So, yeah, that's cool. So, what other bridges? Can you think any other bridges between science and spirituality that you've noticed?
So here's an interesting one, and I'm not sure I can give it its full explanation and uh, the fullness that everyone deserves, but it's definitely something that if you haven't heard about it, you should check it out. And that's homeopathy.
Hmm.
So in Germany, generations ago, there was this doctor, Dr. Hahnemann, and he uh, somehow got this idea that if this plant over here could take care of this muscle ache or muscle aches in general, what he did was he basically created a tea with the plant in water, distilled it down, separated it in half, separated the halves in half, separated those in half, kept separating it until there's no molecular trace of the plant in the tea. Okay, so he kept adding water and giving less and less, putting less and less, and then he would separate that. Same amount of water. Now it's less of the plant tea. Separate that. Okay, this must have taken him forever. When you take his, okay, so he has different levels. So you can go from 6X, which is, there's a lot of tea in this little tiny sugar pill is what it is now, to 30X, which has no trace of any molecule of the plant in it. It's actually the 30X, which is the strongest. So let's say you have the flu. This is how I managed to be a single mom with 4 kids and still go to work and do all the things that I needed to do, because you know how it is with kids. The babysitter didn't show up. This one's got the flu. The next day, this one's got the flu. The next day, this one's got the flu. And it just doesn't work if you're trying to pay your bills. So I used homeopathy. My kids just hated it because they would come home with the beginnings of the flu, for example. I'd give them 3 little sugar pills, put them under your tongue, let them melt. They would go to sleep, and it doesn't have any sleep inducing properties to it. It's just that your body starts to come into itself and says, we're going to fix this like right now. And it takes your flu into overdrive, and you're done with it in 12 hours or less. And then they have to get up and go to school the next day.
I was just gonna say, man, you totally got in the way of what they were like. Rock on! I'm staying home. I'm not feeling well.
just to be fair, I let them take mental health days whenever they needed them. If they just couldn't do it, I would call them in sick. But when they were really ill, I could, if you catch it right at the beginning, and the whole thing about homeopathy is, don't name this illness. Let's talk about the symptoms. And then you match the symptoms up with what the remedy addresses, and you find the closest match, and that usually does the trick. Now, this is medicine. No, this is magic. No, there's something in here that doesn't actually compute. And to be really challenge you, in England, this is still the medicine that the country this is their go-to medicine, homeopathy. It used to be in the United States until some guys got together who decided that they could make a business out of something called the AMA. And so they said, if you practice homeopathy, you'll be arrested, and you have to do allopathic medicine now. And that was a long time ago. That was, just after we became our own country. And so 200 years ago. And so we used to do it too. It was the way it was. That's how we lived, because those people had to get up in the morning, and if they were feeling sick, they had to get out in the fields. So take one day off, fix it, and then, and the trick with homeopathy is, if you hit the right one, the right remedy, you feel like 110% the next day. Not 100%.
Yeah, I love that, because I know it's totally possible that we just move back to our wholeness, right? That's what it sounds like. And I don't know how I haven't bumped into homeopathy yet. Like I even lived in England for 6 years, but I didn't really need the doctor. I think
Yeah.
maybe that's it. Like there's a lot of other things that I'm doing. So in general, me and doctors, we just say hi to each other in the office. There's nothing that I'm needing.
Well, when
So,
I was in Europe, we picked up homeopathic remedies all the time because if we needed it for this, that, or the other, I didn't have to try and bring them with me.
yeah,
I could
no,
just
that's
buy them. Yeah.
wonderful. And
So,
going back, I love the fact that you even stated that you gave your kids mental health days. I did
oh
the
yeah.
same thing when my kids, because I could see that they were actually creating unwellness in their bodies in order to stay home with me.
hmm
And so I adopted a semester of, what did I call them? I called them bunk days. Like you can just bunk off school, like you get to hang with mom day. And it's interesting because then all of a sudden they don't have to have something wrong with them in order to choose what they truly need,
Right.
right? Or want or desire.
Right.
And it eliminated a lot of illness. So
Absolutely. And then poor kids, we were catching it so early that they never really got to be sick.
right.
That's okay. But again, science and spirituality.
Mhm.
Medicine is science, but this is some kind of magic science where there's no molecular trace of the plant in the little sugar pill. And yet, and let me tell you what you get when you take these, say 3, there's not even, they don't even tell you how many to take. You take however many you want.
Mhm.
So I always said 3. I like that number. So I would give them 3. And what it does is it gives your body an aggravation. So you're like banging through your whole body trying to like get it done. So you just go to sleep. The fever jams through, everything jams through, and then you're way better than fine when you're done. So anyway, this isn't about homeopathy, but it did save my life as a single parent for a long time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, it's cool to go to that place where it's like it's going beyond science to magic.
hmm
And yet it says to me like where we think there's nothing is where everything goes to exist. So like all of a sudden there is no tea, and yet like everything you require is there in spades.
Well, it's actually been proven scientifically now
Hmm.
that the more you water something down in a specific way, the stronger it becomes. Weird, I know.
Yeah. Jaw droppingly like yeah, it just blows your mind, and yet
I know.
the results are there.
hmm
Right. And so it's like, okay, it's proven, and yet really I don't think anybody still understands why. So it doesn't
Well,
matter. Let's just
I'm
go
with you. Let's go with results.
there. Hmm.
If they tell me that quartz crystal is hovering between physical forms and in non-physical forms, I might think you're crazy, but if it runs my watch like perfectly because of the way it vibrates, there's something there, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. And every time you talk about it, my whole body goes, ah. So I need to connect myself with some quartz crystal. So mhm. Any other ideas as to the bridge between science and spirituality?
Um, I don't have one for now.
Okay. Well, I think you've given me a lot to think about and play with, really, I would say, because I probably won't think it's just I'll go see how I can play with homeopathy and even crystals again. I definitely play with essential oils and energy. That's
hmm
probably the most that I play with is how energy can create. That's probably my biggest bridge is like how I can change my energy before even my thoughts, um, and see what the results are. And then
Right.
play with changing them a different way because sometimes I probably play with them too long in a way that doesn't create what I desire.
Sort
Sometimes,
of like overthinking your energy.
yeah, sure, and then you just surrender a little bit more and find out what wants to come for you. But I think that if we start to have these conversations, we'll also find a bit more of a collaborative spirit to those who are very science. Like, I was gifted a child who's super sciencey. He's got like a little tiny opening for maybe he has an opening for spirituality. He has an opening for me. And yet I figure, like, as he goes down that rabbit hole, the more that I support him in that, he's going to come to a place that you can't help but go down science and find spirituality, and you can't help but go down spirituality and find science.
Mhm.
And the fact that he's open to me and that we're so bonded and close, it just, that allowance for each other's spirit will create a greater wholeness in the world. And so, in a world right now that seems to be very divided, a lot of people spouting science to make each other wrong, and then spouting spirituality or energetics. Like, what if we just got into the space of what else is possible? What else, like, what do you know? Go all the way that you need to go so that we can find each other in that bridge and then come back together. And
Yeah,
that's what I'm.
absolutely. I always feel that when you feel that things getting tight in here, like, what did you say? I can't believe you believe that. Don't you read? Don't you know anything? Don't you, and the minute I start to feel that, I know this is my forgiveness moment. I'm forgiving myself for falling for this little tiny rock in the giant road of my life.
Mhm.
And so, that's where I take it, because there's so much going on in anyone's life at any moment. And I'm sorry, but if you want to fight, there's plenty to fight about. And if you don't want to fight and you want to be at peace, there's a big playground for that.
For sure. And going back to something you said earlier about it's okay not to know, I think that's a really powerful place to stand. And too
Mm.
often we stand in what we know, right? Which is a little rock. Like, what we know now, or what I know, is even littler than what we know. And yet what we don't know is where things change and where magic happens and where we connect and where we come around. And so it's like that restriction is usually a sense of fear, but it's also like, I know something, right? Like, and
It's
the more that we stand in what we know, we're not open to all those other possibilities that could change everything for us. And so I just invite everybody that the bridge in between that is, I don't know, and what else is possible, and opening yourself up to that. And it doesn't mean you need to adopt what somebody else knows, right? It just means
right.
openness to not knowing and
And
possibilities.
let go of outcomes.
Yeah. Mhm.
Don't decide where you're going to go when the fog sets in on your mountain climb. Don't decide, well, I saw the peak before and that's where I'm going to be, maybe not, and maybe you're going to wind up in a cave somewhere with interesting stuff, interesting people. I don't know. But I mean, don't pre-program your learning, because you
Right.
can't learn if you already know. So
Absolutely. And a lot of times, like, that's the easiest way to be disappointed, because you think you're going over to the left up to the peak, and you ended up actually walking to the right into the cave, and it was so much better than you could anticipate, but you're pissed off because you had in your mind you were going to the peak.
that's
And so
right.
it doesn't matter how awesome it is inside there, you're pissed off. Right? Maybe I've been there before. I don't know.
You think? Me too.
What? A little bit of self-revelation for a minute, but yeah, I'm totally with you, and I'm thankful for this crazy conversation that we're having, and hopefully it'll open things up for other people to embrace that we don't always have to know, we don't always have to have the answers, but that there are bridges between the science and the spirituality world. There are bridges between what somebody else knows and what we know. And life
Well,
can be magic.
my final thing that I really want to say is that you always have to leave a place at the table for wonder.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is a place where I personally do not understand how homeopathy works intellectually. I've heard how it works, but I even practice it and I don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to just wonder. It's okay to be in gratitude or, just let it be what it is. You don't have to know how every last thing on earth operates. And I'm talking mostly to left brain people here because if you have a healthy dose of right brain, you already know how to surf that divide between the two. Um, but if you're heavily left brain, and sometimes I get into my left brain really deeply, um, you have to pull yourself out and say, life is no fun if there's no sense of wonderment.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. It really does bring the joy and the fun and the magic, right?
Hmm.
And I'm, I don't know. There might be somebody out there who doesn't want to have joy and fun and magic, but I don't think that I know any of them. So wonder does it. It absolutely does. And it's funny because I'm like, I don't really know how, like somebody could probably explain how a TV works. I don't know. I don't care. I just am so excited that a TV, the radio, all these things, when I turn them on, we have light,
Right,
right? And
right.
so how many other areas are you reaping the rewards of the result, but you don't know the why? Are you just willing to follow what your body is asking for into a whole new world, a new solution, whatever it is? So
Absolutely.
I appreciate you so much and all that you've shared today, and just being able to hang out with you is always awesome.
I agree. Thanks for inviting me, Tara.
You're welcome. And I'll put your details in below
Great,
in the
thanks.
verbiage area. And then also, if people have questions for Deb, I will field them her way. I'll have her have this video too so that she can share it. But have a conversation. This isn't just about me and Deb. If you guys out there have anything that you want to say and share what your bridges are, what you've experienced, what you know, go ahead and share it. What you don't know, what you hope that we do eventually find out. Like that's how things are found out too, is having questions you can't answer and going down that hole until you find answers, right? So thanks and have an awesome day, Deb.
You too.
Thank you.